Your turn,
Howdy,
Adam.
everybody.
All right, I just
How many of you have shared something from UpWorthy? Sweet, that's what I like to hear. Okay, so I'm going to run through a bunch of slides really fast and talk really fast, and then don't panic, we'll have the slides online. So basically, our job is to find content and then make it more shareable. Oftentimes, organizations will have an amazing piece of content, they'll give it a standard title, and it won't do anything because it isn't really engaged for Facebook to make people click. When people are on Facebook, their dream is to share only the things that they can actually click on and read through. But if you already tell them everything beforehand, they're not going to click on your stuff, which is why we come along. Next slide. So the way our whole business was built was that there was a video at Move On called Zach Walls Speaks About Family. At the time, nobody had heard of Zach Walls. They knew no idea who he was, and it had 1 million views on it. And so, but that was pretty good, but they were like, well, we can make it better. So Move On repackaged it with 2 lesbians raised a baby, and this is what they got. And it got 17 million views. And so it sort of spurred us to realize that, you could actually have content framed better, and it'll go much farther. So, and now if you Google 2 lesbians with safe search off on Google, you get that as the top search instead of porn. So, good ideas can get out there in large quantities if you do them right. Next slide. So basically what we do is, in a nutshell, is we find an amazing piece of content out there on the internet. We frame it for Facebook. We then promote it on Facebook with our 1 million fans, and then, we see what happens, and then we profit, theoretically, though we're a startup, so we're not right now, and then we invest in nutshells. Next slide. You're probably thinking to yourself, well, that's sort of manipulative. You're changing the headlines and not telling people what they're going to get. But marketing is not inherently evil. You have to accept that if you frame your stuff well, it's going to mean more eyes are on it. And if you want people to come back to your website, you have to have Facebook as a platform and use it in a way that gets people to come there. You can't use it as a PR tool that's just press releases. You have to give them something to really come back for and look at. A lot of organizations just post their own stuff on Facebook, and we often recommend that you post all kinds of things that your audience may be interested in, because then you're not just a press release, you're an organization that is a reliable source of news in general for the topics that they care about. And so oftentimes our organizations we work with will diversify the stuff they put on there and put stuff that may not have anything to do with what they're talking about. So next slide, how we sleep at night. So you're saying, well, these are a little tricky. Well, as a perfect example of this, the Nation put out this video about racial profiling in New York City, and it had about 60,000 views. And then we gave it a better headline and put it on our site, and it got 800,000 views. So, it's really important because the information you guys are putting out there is really important for the world at large, and it can change the world. So you have to be okay with framing it in a way that's provocative to get people to see it. And not everybody can frame their content like we do, obviously. You have serious brands with legitimate, voice issues that you have to cover, but you can be more creative in the way that you frame that content. Next slide. So basically, I'm really amazing at my job. I got us 18 million page views, and I have 15,000 fans on my page because I'm awesome, and I got 1 million people to watch a bank oversight hearing because I'm really awesome. So if you go to the next slide, I'm really dumb too. So last year, I predicted 100 of my posts would break 500,000 page views, and 5 did. Which means, if you go to the next slide, I'm only 5% expert and 95% not. And anybody who tells you they can make anything go viral is not telling you the truth, or they're really naive. Because pretty much almost everything you do will not go viral, even if it's great. And you have to accept that and move on to your next thing when it doesn't. And that's why we science everything. Next slide. We test everything. Everything we do is A/B tested. Everything we do, we look at carefully through the science. We don't just go with what our gut says. We have to use data every single time to make sure what we're doing is good. How much time do I got?
A few more minutes.
Okay. So, next slide. What content is best for social? It has to be good. That's it. If it's an emotionally good, resonant argument, and as long as you frame it well, it just has to be good content. It has to be, it tells a story. So let's sort of talk about what's viral. The next slide. So, to determine how you make something go viral, you have to look at it from the sort of math. It's the shares per view times the clicks per share equals the virality level. I know that's a little range. So for an example, if you have a piece of content that's really not that great, but you give it an amazing headline, that means it's going to get tons of clicks and not a lot of shares. Vice versa, if you're getting tons of shares on something that you put on Facebook and you're not getting any clicks, that means you framed it horribly, but you have something that could actually go viral. So when we're looking at what really goes viral, it has to be the stuff that gets lots of shares and lots of clicks, which means it has to be really good content and really good framing. If you're framing bad content, you're going to disappoint your users and they're not going to come back. So you always have to make sure what you're sharing is actually good. Next slide. So why the hell do people share? So people share when New York Times did this study. Between anger and happiness is where people get the most excited. So like when they're mad but not so depressed that they don't want to do it, like they think there's no hope, you want to get them to that point where they think there's something they can do and they're also really angry about it and want to do something about it. And that's where the magic, that's where the real sharing happens. And if you get them really depressed and sad, they're not going to share at all. So don't ever depress them when you're framing your content. And where do they share? Next slide is Facebook most of the time. I don't know about you guys, but for us, 95% of our traffic comes from Facebook. So if you have a budget for social media, you should be working on framing your content for Facebook if that's where your main audience is, because that's going to be the driving factor to get people to come back to you. And then this is the most important. Next slide. Space. You have to frame it for the entire world at large, because you want everybody to share it, not just your audience. It's easy to get your audience to like and share your stuff because they're already on the same page with you. And it's harder to get your audience's friends to do it. And it's even harder to get your audience's friends to share it. And it's even harder to get your friends' friends to share and like it. And then if you can get Kevin Bacon to share it, you won. So you really need to focus on framing your content for as wide of audience as possible to get the widest distribution. Next slide. So again, this is really easy, I know. Find a great piece of content, frame it, make sure your website is framed to really share for stuff on Facebook. If you look at a YouTube link, a video on YouTube, it's not easy to find the share button. On our site, there's a big, giant share button, so it makes it really easy for people to share. Next slide. So again, this is just standard. Like, finding your content, you just need a hero and a villain, an emotional story arc, and a meaningful message. And you have to be in the right time at the right place, and you have to have a psychic on hand who knows exactly what the public is thinking about at any time. It's really, really simple in that way. But as long as you have the basics of a really good story that connects with people emotionally, they're going to do it. Alan, how am I doing?
Wrap it up.
Okay. So I'll skip the rest of this stuff, but basically the next slide just sort of shows you our top 10. And so basically all of these things have one amazing, they all say things that resonate with their audience. They all say things that we're all thinking in the back of our head. I wanted to be a part of this. I agree with this. I want to share this. And all of them are framed in an innocuous enough way that people aren't paranoid about sharing it with their friends. So you really want to make sure, again, that all of your content is framed in that perfect way. And I'll load the rest of the slides later, and you can look at them, and I'll explain the rest of it another time.